a little bit more on symbolism. Uh, I don't know, just because um, some of these things, it's just kind of important um, to have it out there that people can see and understand. So uh, so tonight, okay, I went back to the book of Exodus, and there are many symbols and signs and wonders in there, and we're just going to pick out the significant ones, and the idea. There's hold on. The idea and the question that we put out there is, why didn't the burning bush be consumed by fire? And so we will go into that tonight. It's really quite simple, but it challenges the belief system. So now the book of Exodus itself, all right, it just as a little summary, because I don't know how many of you have read it or know anything, but it is uh it's about Moses leading the Hebrews out of Egypt through the desert to the promised land. Okay. And Moses, of course, just a little background. Moses is the baby in the basket that that the Hebrew mother sent down the stream, and the Egyptian princes took took the baby in to raise. And so Moses really grew up as an Egyptian, but his heritage did become known, and so now, he went back to get his people who were in bondage. All right, and so I have to put here also, and no matter where we're at, whether it's the Old Testament or the New Testament, we're always looking at God. We're always looking at the relationship of God, the guidance and the protection of God. Um, it's just what it is. And no, that's not normally the way that we would study the Bible. Okay. Um, because for most traditionally, it is all about the burning bush, and it's like a, oh man, and it's kind of like I don't know, a wow thing. But um, in the okay, in these opening chapters, then the part of the chapter that we're just reading tonight, Moses is receiving his commission from God and guidance from God. In other words, Moses was returning to Egypt to bring the people out, and God is telling him, God has commissioned him and is telling him how. All right, that's what it's all about. So, George.
Yes. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was on fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Do not draw near. Take your shoes from off your feet, for the place whereon you are standing is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God.
Okay, so as we usually do, we're going to break this down. And the very first thing we're going to realize comes from this phrase, and it says, "And the angel of the Lord appeared." All right, now this comes into the topic of mysticism when we teach the introductory course. Um, when you see this phrase, you know it's a vision. And right away, we're answering the question, why did the bush not burn? But let's talk about how that happened. So, so when you think about the scripture that we just read, you got to think about it as a vision. All right. And so Moses in a vision saw a bush burning but not consumed. When he went near it, he heard the divine voice speak to him. But Moses was still in the vision, the dream or the vision. Okay. Now, dreams and visions are common. More than 40% of the Bible is made up. And God's revelations and divine communications were commonly imparted in visions and dreams. Remember, we talked about the prophets. The prophets received their um, direction, their whatever, through visions and dreams. Okay, and when you have visions or dreams, okay, there's always symbols involved. And even to this day, if you talk to a spiritualist who is a medium or whatnot, and their communications come with symbols, not just direct. Okay, so he saw the burning bush in a vision; it wasn't consumed. And when you're having a dream or a vision, you can dream
Very much.
anything. There's no rules. Okay, there's no rules. Um, and so the bush, he dreamed about the bush. And so in a dream, that can happen. Okay, you can't take this thing literally. And um, so that's why the bush was not consumed. Now, in terms of, okay, the bush itself, okay, well, symbolizes two insights. Okay. The non-consuming fire was the symbol of God's presence. And of course, God's presence would never be consumed anyway, because God is everywhere, ever present. And so the non-consuming fire symbolized God's presence. And the bush itself was a symbol of trials and difficulties. And in those areas of the Near East, both men and animals suffered from these thorny bushes and brambles. And so, so we explained this here, but remember, Moses was of that culture, okay? And Moses in
I got
his
earplugs
dream
and I
or
can't
his
hear you.
vision, he was getting
I got the earphone.
uh wait a minute, hold on. Okay, anyway, but um in his dream, he knew, in other words, God didn't come out and say, no, no, Moses, the symbol here of the burning bush is my presence. No, but Moses, because he knew the culture and whatnot, he knew and he got the message, basically. So Moses was to suffer many difficulties, but he came out victorious. The fact that the bush burned but was not consumed indicated that ultimately Moses would triumph in his great divine mission. And of course, he did. So Moses suffered both in Egypt and in the desert, but he succeeded in leading Israel out of Egypt, the land of bondage. Okay, now there's some other things here, not necessarily just the bush. You notice it said, take and remove your shoes. So I thought this was kind of interesting to know. Owing to much dust, mire, and dirt in the streets, people in the Near East take off their shoes when they enter a church or mosque or any other holy place where prayers are offered to God. But they also remove their shoes when they enter a room or a house which is furnished with rugs. And they do so especially when in the presence of a ruler or high religious dignitary. To remove one's shoes in a house or a holy place is the highest token of respect to the host and to God. So just thought I would put that in there for you to understand. But metaphorically, okay, shoes are symbolic of contempt, false belief, and disregard for responsibility. So, and the thing about taking your shoes off, like in a holy place, many people in that, well, many, I don't know how many, but that I've met and gone that are kind of part of all of this. You take your shoes off when you go in their house. And I went to some groups, went to a Buddhist group, and they clearly took their shoes off. You couldn't get in unless you took shoes off. So interesting is all. And again, Moses understood removing his shoes because he was part of that culture. And the other thing though that bugs me when they write this, okay, they didn't, we think shoes, even shoes that may have been sandals, and sometimes no shoes at all, but that's the way it's interpreted. So, all right. Okay, and let's talk a little bit about this. It said that Moses was afraid to look at God. Now, what this was and what this is, it was a belief system, okay? And it was based on the fact that, okay, God was revered, sacred, and responsible for everything good and bad. I'm sure you've heard that before. And so the belief was, and I have this the scripture from later on in Exodus. Okay, the belief was that you would die if you were to see God. Now, those people back then, most people nowadays do not know that you will never see God. You can't ever see God because God is spirit. But what happened back then, people didn't know. I mean, what they knew was just that about God. and God was everything to them. But they didn't know anything about God being a spirit or whatnot. And so it came, the belief just came that if you were to see God, you would die. And that was the belief system then. But how did that change? And that's one of the things that the Muslims, why the Muslims came to be, is um, because of you can't see God, you can't have any statues, which later came, Catholic Church has lots of statues and stuff, and Islam, you do not have pictures or statues or anything. So that's just a little aside from this. Um, and so it's like, okay, so we know about the burning bush now and why it wasn't consumed, but like it's kind of like, so what? Okay. Um, well, let me read this so that you get the full picture of the burning bush, and then I got something else. Okay. Many scholars and archaeologists have tried to find an answer to explain the burning bush not being consumed, and we just consider it a strange phenomenon. Some believe it was a bush with some kind of shiny berries which looked like a blazing fire, or they suggest that it might have been blossoms of the mistletoe that grows on acacia bushes. These interpreters also tell us that the bush is covered with oil glands and they burst into flames. But there is no such burning bushes in the area, nor are they ever seen or mentioned by nomads or travelers. And so, I'm sure that scholars even today are still looking, but it never ceases to amaze me how simple, Dr. Lancer brought this forward, and how simple it is when you class it. It's a vision, uh, and to me, it just makes things more clear, and it takes the oh, I don't know what you want to call it, but the Bible and classifies this as a as a miracle. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is this is so this is so simple, and it makes sense. And that's what I have heard from many about the Aramaic way. It makes sense. So okay, so that covers the burning bush. But the other thing, we have to relate this. Uh-oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay. Um, we're going to go back to the teachings of Jesus. Okay, even though Jesus came later, he's still talking about the same thing, uh, and it's just an example of the counsel or the presence of God that Moses was receiving in a dream or a vision. Um, but what Jesus did, and remember, Jesus didn't come to create a new religion and new belief. No, he came to try to tell the Jewish people about the fact about God, and about God's presence and all of that. That's what he came for. And so it applies. Jesus' teachings apply throughout the Bible because he taught what God really was, what God really is. And so it applies back then, but the problem is it should apply now. But Christianity, they take this literally. Western Christianity takes it literally. And theology, Christian theology doesn't, for the most, well, okay, Christian theology does not teach that we, as children of God, can communicate with God. Okay. Similar fashion to Moses. And it happens every day to those that are open to it. You receive guidance, and we've all had visions and dreams, I'm sure. And so part of, aside from the bush, and that's kind of interesting, but this is part of the whole, part of the whole book of Exodus, the prophets, whatever. And God instructed Moses throughout until they came to the promised land. So that's what we can take from this, along with the picture of the burning bush. Okay, so I told you it was going to be light and easy tonight. So here we go. All right, this comes from a different commentary, Aramaic Light on Exodus through Deuteronomy. That's where most of this came from. And so I'm just gonna, hopefully you guys, we can discuss or whatever, say whatever you want. But it's known as a miracle, and literally it has no explanation. But does it have more meaning? Knowing that it was in a vision. Like I said to me, I said, okay, for me, it just it made it clear. So so that's my question for tonight, or whatever you want to discuss. Or because when we're talking about the Old Testament, most people don't really want to have anything to do with it because they can only relate to the New Testament, which is sad. Okay.